Welcome. My name is Musho. I am a student teacher with the Village Zendo, and I also lead the Catskill Zen Circle in Catskill, New York. I see one of my Sangha is here tonight. Hey, Jeff. Um, Tonight's talk is called The Adventure of the Self. Before I start, I want to see, are there any newcomers? Because it's actually usually a newcomers night. Oh, one newcomer. Mei Lee Sun, welcome to our group. It's really important to have newcomers. Newcomers support the practice of the people who've been coming for a long time. And of course, we try to support your practice too as you start your adventure with Zen meditation. So last month, I gave a talk at the Catskill Zen Circle about Buddha nature. And I thought it might be interesting to talk about another aspect, which might be called self-nature. But ultimately, there's no distinction between the two. They're really the same thing, or no thing. But for this talk, I want to explore the idea of the self that you are experiencing right now, your very own self. That's what I want to talk about tonight. And I'm going to start out with 3 quotes. First, from Miles Davis, who said, "Man, sometimes it takes a long time to sound like yourself." Next, we have Bodhidharma. He said, "Self-nature is subtle and mysterious." And then, of course, Dogen. To study the Buddha way is to study the self. It's kind of the mantra of the Village Zendo. To study the Buddha way is to study the self. The self it's huge, right? The self is just gigantic. It encompasses our identity, our personality, our perceptions, and of course our fragile ego. Everything about us seems to be involved in the self. It's enormous, but at the same time, it's incredibly intimate. It is as close to you as anything could possibly be. It's right there with you now, listening to my voice and trying to make sense out of what I'm talking about. It's the self. And it's very difficult to make generalizations about the self. And that is why Dogen asks us to study the self. I was thinking about that first line, and to study, right? To study is to devote time and devote attention, to devote time and attention to the functioning of our complex, ever-changing entity. We must study the self, and studying the self is the Buddha way. And Zen meditation, our zazen that we do, is the study of the self. People often come to Zen meditation to quiet their minds, to quiet the dramas and traumas of life that churn in the mind. They're just looking for a little bit of peace and quiet. I think most of the people who come to the Catskill Zen Circle are just looking for a little bit of quiet, and I totally get that. And the Zen meditation hall is designed to be a quiet, peaceful place. And it is, for the most part. But it doesn't take very long for new meditators to notice that their thoughts are constantly arriving. And those thoughts often contain the dramas and traumas that they hoped would be quiet. And when you realize this is the way our study begins. To study the self is very different from studying subjects like philosophy or science, because the self is imaginary and real at the same time. It shifts from one place to another and is dependent on conditions. The self defies physics and logic. The source of the self is basically all of time and space, right? Going back to before your great great grandparents were born, um, and including things that happened to you in fourth grade. It's all there. The source is infinite. I've been reading. I've been reading some of the writings from Zen teacher Robert Aiken Roshi. He passed away in 2010, and he wrote a little book that I read in the very beginning of my practice. It's called The Mind of Clover. I really enjoyed that book. It's a kind of a meditation on the Zen precepts, but Aiken Roshi was a poet and a really excellent writer. And I love this little book called The Mind of Clover. And in it was one particular sentence that has stuck with me for years. I went back to look it up and I noticed that I'd folded over that page, which is lucky because I would have had to look through the whole book to try to figure it out. But anyway, in The Mind of Clover, Aiken Roshi says, I acknowledge that my perceptions are empty and I am no longer anxious to keep my ego bastion in good repair. That's what Aiken Roshi says. I looked up the dictionary for the word bastion. A bastion is a fortification, a strongly defended fortress. It's a lot of work to keep your ego bastion in good repair, right? Protecting a fort. But the problem is there are monkeys and wild ox everywhere, and the floorboards are creaking, and the roof is leaking. And Aiken Roshi was no longer interested in the defense and upkeep of the bastion of his ego. I really loved that. He just decided he was done with all that. Also, in the same sentence, he admits, I acknowledge that my perceptions are empty. Even what he's seeing, hearing, and experiencing. And so, what about emptiness, right? Emptiness is the self, sometimes called no self. To have some understanding of emptiness is a good way to have some understanding of the self. But in Dharma talks, it's really tricky to describe emptiness, although I've tried in other talks. Sorry about that. Um, Emptiness is really beyond description in words. That's what's great about it, actually. The Heart Sutra that we chant often says, in emptiness, there's no form, no sensation, conception, discrimination, or awareness. And those 5 conditions actually describe the self, which the Heart Sutra considers a phenomenon or a realm of consciousness that doesn't exist. The Heart Sutra is a very difficult document. It even more profoundly states that form is emptiness and emptiness is form. It's kind of the key to the Heart Sutra. And if you realize that form is emptiness and emptiness is form, then the self becomes even more elusive than it was. I would say from my own experience with my own self, that it has form and is very busy protecting the fort. But when I try to describe where or what it is, words do not encompass it. Because the self is elusive, ephemeral, and empty, and at the same time has form and is very real. I have been a visual artist practically my whole life. And when I started getting some recognition for my work, and I was included in a show, I was usually asked to write an artist's statement. For me and many artists, this is a very tedious and irritating assignment, because my whole life's work is to present some kind of undefinable self, some sort of universal thusness that I incompetently try to express, right? That's what artists are doing, I suppose, trying to express the unexpressible and always coming up short in some way. And as far as the artist statement goes, if I could describe it in words in an easily digestible paragraph, then why would I have to make all these weird paintings? You know what I mean? Why would I have to do all this to describe the self if I could put it down in a statement? It's always difficult. There are people who are quite good at writing artist statements, and I envy them. It's an art in itself. One of the first Dharma talks that I heard when I started my practice with the Village Zendo was from Aiken Roshi. And as I remember, in one of her talks, she said something to the effect of, to describe anything about yourself is a betrayal. That really stuck with me. Any way you try to define yourself is going to create some kind of barrier around you, a bastion that you'll have to protect. I was sitting there at a retreat one year. I think it was at Garrison, and it was a long evening sit, and I was tired, and I was bored with myself, and I started having this. I guess I was thinking about all the things I have to do, get home, get my studio going. I don't know what I was working on, and get my artwork going, and try to make something of my crumbling art career. But suddenly I realized while I was just sitting there that I don't have to be an artist. It was an amazing revelation, actually. And it wasn't that I wanted to stop making my weird sculptures and paintings and inventing things and drawing characters. It wasn't that. It was just that I didn't have to be an artist anymore, right? Like like an artist. And it was really important, and I felt really good about that night and that kind of opening. And it's an opening that anyone can have. I mean, however you define yourself as a teacher or I don't know, a doctor, a lawyer, a therapist, a construction worker, a person who drives a bus, whatever it is, you don't have to be a bus driver. You can drive a bus and you can do construction, but you don't have to be a construction worker. And I would advise you not to. Because like Joshin Roshi was saying, it's a betrayal of the self to define it and pin it down. Tonight I have a koan for you that I think addresses what I'm talking about. It's case 86 from the Blue Cliff record, Yun Men's kitchen pantry and main gate. Yun Men imparted some words saying, everyone has a light, When you look at it, you don't see it, and it's dark and dim. What is everybody's light? He himself answered on their behalf, the kitchen pantry and the main gate. He also said, a good thing isn't as good as nothing. Then, of course, there's a verse by Soto. Spontaneously shining, ranged in solitary light, he opens a route for you. Flowers fall, the tree has no shadow. When looking, who doesn't see? Seeing or not seeing, riding backwards on an ox, entering the Buddha shrine. Yourself is a beautiful shining light, but you cannot see it. It's because you are the light, and a light cannot see the light. Yunmen asks, what is everybody's light? And then he answers with the items of our ordinary life, the kitchen pantry and the main gate. I mean, it could be the coat rack, the doorbell, the tires on the car, or the cup of water, right? Just the ordinary things. It's good. It's good. Finally, he adds, a good thing isn't as good as nothing. I think this is about no comparisons, right? This is form and emptiness all over again. Good and bad, or no good and bad. No comparisons. Thank you, Yunmen. The self is spontaneously shining, ranged in solitary light. I don't really have to explain that. I just want to say thank you, Soto, wherever you are, for that. In the 10 ox herding pictures, if you've ever seen that Zen story, in this 10 ox herding pictures, the self is characterized as a wild ox, very difficult to catch and control. Aiken Roshi characterized the self as a bastion, and Yunmen says it is a light you cannot see. But I would like to characterize the self as an adventure. That's my way of seeing it. The self is an adventure. The dictionary says an adventure is an unusual and exciting, typically hazardous experience or activity. I think it's a pretty good description of the self, actually. An unusual and exciting, typically hazardous experience or activity. It's kind of where we're at all the time. And on adventures, right? We go voluntarily on adventures, or sometimes we're pushed into an adventure. And the adventure that I'm talking about is the adventure of the self. Uncertainty awaits. There are fortresses, wild ox, shadowless trees, and flowers that fall. And there's the Buddha shrine in there too. It's a long adventure. It takes a long time to sound like yourself. It's extremely difficult to defend your bastion. No one can see their own shining light. Even more difficult to understand is that the self is empty and the self is form. To study the self and to understand something about it is our actual practice. It's hard work and very few people are willing to do it. But you know why we do this work? It's because when one ox is rampaging, it's bad. The dishes are broken and feelings are hurt or worse. But when a massive herd of ox go on a rampage, everything is trampled. The farm fields are burnt, the cities are reduced to rubble. It takes hardened, fixed, fortified versions of the self to create the cruelty that is all around, the cruelty in this cruel world, by holding on to the self. And that is why we have to loosen our grip. because we're all on this adventure together. And it isn't easy, but it is the Buddha way. The self is boundless and unfathomable, with a million forms, with no forms, completely empty, but shining bright and creating the whole so-called world. I've written a poem to end my talk. It's called The Adventure of the Self. The self is an adventure with no beginning and no end. Is it empty or is it real? What's around the corner? Which way is best? Pitfalls or discoveries? Monkeys and ox running wild? Sit down and take a look at the situation. Who is on this adventure anyway? Everyone. Thank you for listening.